Welcome to the Simply Vegan podcast, brought to you by the team at Vegan Food and Living, the UK's best-selling vegan magazine. Well, I was due to be joined by Marissa from the Plant-Based Food Alliance today. Unfortunately, we had some problems with signal. She's up in the mountains in the Alps, I believe, and we couldn't connect properly. So very kindly, Ellie Busby, founder of Vojo, has joined us today. And I'm really excited to hear what she's got to say. Hi, Ellie. How are you?
Hi, Holly. Thank you so much for having me.
So you are, and I'm going to probably mess this up, a nutrigenomist. No, I knew it. Nutrigenomicist.
Yeah, you got it.
So this is all about DNA nutrition, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
So do you want to tell us kind of a bit about, introduce yourself and your background, and then, tell us what this is all about?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a registered nutritionist and I specialize in genetics and how our diet or how our genes determine which foods and which nutrients are best for us. So which nutrients we need more of, which nutrients we potentially need less of. And it's an easy way to personalize your diet and find out what works for you. To cut a long story short.
Yeah. So how did you get into it then? When did you first go vegan?
I went vegan 10 years ago now. And at the time it was great. I mean, I think Tesco had just released their first kind of vegan range. So it was very exciting. And I remember I had to go to Tesco every time I went shopping because it was the only place you could get vegan stuff.
It's changed so much, hasn't it? It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm very glad it's changed. But and things were great for the first few years. I was one of those militant vegans, I was like, why is like everyone should be vegan? Why is not everybody vegan? It's so easy.
Yeah.
And it changed my life in a lot of ways. I got into cooking. I got interested in nutrition. In the first few years, I also opened a vegan restaurant, which went really well. It really like this change in my life. It was a really huge change in my life. But then 4 to 5 years in, my health started taking a downward turn. I'm a runner as well, so my running was really affected. Like I had bad fatigue, my hair was falling out. Like all of these horror stories that you hear about a vegan diet came true, and I was like, "What? Like I can't believe this is happening to me." But the last thing I wanted was for my family and friends to say, "I told you so." So I refused to go back to eating meat or animal foods. And then I studied nutrition and became a nutritionist. And on that journey, I had a DNA test because before I studied nutrition, I also hadn't heard of this. I hadn't heard of the fact that you could find out about your nutrition from your DNA. It sounds crazy. And I had a DNA test, and I learned all of these things about my body, which just blew my mind. And I knew what nutrients I needed. I now knew which supplements worked for me and which didn't, and which forms I needed, and all of these things. And since I've tailored my diet to my genes, I felt great again. So this is something that I want everyone to have access to. And even if it's not like a genetic test, I want everyone, like all vegans, to feel supported, because I feel like there's a lot of information out there for new vegans. There's not much that's supporting vegans people who've been vegan for a few years, or even 5 years or 10 years. That's really the core of my mission.
So how did you change your diet then when you discovered these, things about your DNA?
One thing I changed. So there's one particular gene which determines how well you can make omega-3. So, there's two band camps in veganism. The people that say you can get all your omega-3 from chia and flax seeds, and the people who say you really need to be supplementing DHA, algal oil. Yeah. And it's hard to work out who's right. With a lot of vegan nutrition, actually, there's a lot of contradictory advice, and it's really hard to figure out because actually they're both right. and it depends on your DNA. So, for example, I'm a fast converter, which means I can get a lot of my omega-3 from chia seeds and flax seeds. So one thing I did was I really just made sure I was getting that every day, because I know that I can get it from that and I don't necessarily need to supplement. But the flip side of that is that if you're a fast converter, you're also very sensitive to vegetable oils. So omega-3 and omega-6, you may have heard of omega-6 because you need to balance them both. You need to get the ratio right. So you could be getting all the omega-3 you need, but if you're getting too much omega-6, which is high in vegetable oils and processed foods and all of these kind of bad foods, then, it doesn't matter how much omega-3 you're getting. You need to be bringing down the omega-6 as well. Right. So I found out that I was sensitive to omega-6s, and a lot of the issues I'd be having, like joint pain, which was really affecting my running, like knee pain was one of the main things that I was finding a problem, completely disappeared as soon as I took vegetable oil out of my diet, which is crazy because, as vegans, we're told that rapeseed oil is great because it's high in omega-3, but actually it's so much higher in omega-6. So for me, it really wasn't good for me.
Wow, it's fascinating, isn't it? I'm really interested in this because I have a family member, and he was vegetarian for decades, and then he looked into the whole sort of DNA diet thing and concluded that he needed meat in his diet. And he told his children that too, that they had his DNA and that they needed meat as well. And they were sort of very veggie/vegan at the time. So now they're all eating really meat heavy diets. And obviously being a vegan in the family, I'm kind of like, well, it's one thing I don't know enough about to kind of argue the case. That everything else I've got covered now after sort of 4 years of being vegan. So yeah, I'm really interested in this whole kind of thing. I mean, what's the science behind it? Have there been lots of studies done? Is this just kind of like another fad, or is it something we should all be really thinking about?
Yeah, there are a huge amount of studies into the overlap between genetics and nutrition, a lot. And it's really a shame because it's, in my opinion, it's such an underutilized part of the research. I mean, actually, I don't know if you know, but the UK have been funding a huge project, which is to launch their personalised healthcare system based on genetics. So the UK have been funding this for years and years, and we have one of the biggest genetic kind of biobanks in the UK. It's actually called the UK Biobank. So yeah, the UK are kind of at the forefront of this in terms of health, but in terms of nutrition, there's a lot of research which isn't being utilised. But it's interesting what did you say it was your brother-in-law?
It's my brother-in-law, yeah.
What was his reason for, did he say like what symptoms he had or like what genes he had that meant that he had to eat meat?
I think it was relevant to kind of muscle gain and kind of being fit and strong. And I think perhaps he felt that he wasn't getting that on a vegetarian diet.
I mean, yeah, he is right in one sense. There are genes associated with how well you can build muscle. But on the other hand, the reason that I think this is so important, that I think knowing your genes is so important, is so you can work with them to do what you want. So, the reason for Vojo is that no one should have to give up on a vegan diet for feeling bad or not reaching their goals or whatever else, because you can work with your body. There's always a way to work with it. You just need to know yourself. So the fact that he concluded that he actually needed meat is an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm guessing, perhaps it could have been that he needed more protein and that he could have been getting those proteins from other, plant-based foods, but he chose to, I don't know, it's a complex issue, isn't it? How do we know what nutrients we might be missing then? Can we find out without doing a DNA test?
Yeah, definitely. So, for example, with iron, there are some people who are very susceptible to anemia and low iron levels, and some people who are absolutely fine. Like for me personally, iron is something that I have never had to worry about. My ferritin levels, my blood tests have always been perfect with iron. And then there are those that always struggle with it. Like no matter what they do, they seem to be low in iron. And that comes down to your genes too. So I have a gene running in my family called the Hemochromatosis gene, which actually helps you absorb more iron from plant foods. On the other hand, some people have genes which prevent them from absorbing so much iron from foods. And, you know, the iron from plant foods is already a little bit more difficult for your body to deal with. So, yeah, for these people, you might want to supplement iron, especially around your period if you're a woman. But for me personally, I want to make sure that I'm not supplementing iron, because actually high ferritin, high iron stores can also be problematic.
So I guess it's about listening to your body as well, and thinking about perhaps, you know, things that your family have. Because I know my mum was anemic a lot growing up. I mean, she wasn't vegan or anything. And I've been anemic in the past, and my daughter also had low iron recently. So yeah, it does make sense. And it kind of does make sense as well, doesn't it? Because we are all different. It's not kind of one size fits all with healthcare or, you know, nutrition.
Exactly.
What other signs should we look out for then? You know, things like brittle nails, things like that, if we're, you know, sort of flashing up that we're deficient in things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many signs of various deficiencies, and excess of nutrients as well. For example, if you're anemic, you could feel fatigued or tired. You could be experiencing hair loss. You can have palpitations. And one thing people don't know actually is you can have cracked lips and a sore tongue as well. So I come across quite a few people who have sore lips all the time, and they just don't know why. And actually it is a sign of anemia, which can come from either low iron or low B12. But yeah, it's not, you know, these deficiencies aren't just exclusive to a vegan diet.
Yeah, exactly. Some people, you know, as you mentioned, sort of turn their back on veganism, as you almost did, I'm guessing, when you kind of, you know, if you weren't so determined not to eat meat again. I think, you know, sometimes some of these signs kind of appear, and then you've got that pressure from family or friends or society in general saying, oh, this is what, you know, I told you this is what's going to happen if you went vegan. You're not getting all your nutrients. You need to eat a steak, or, you know, I mean, I've had that, God, so many times. If ever I'm ill, which is very rare since going vegan, it's, oh, you know what you need, a rare steak. And it's like, no, I don't. So it's, you know, how can we know what foods we should be eating then without getting a DNA test? Or do you really recommend we all kind of go out and get one done?
In my opinion, it's an easier place to start, but of course you can work with trial and error. You can listen to your body. You can figure things out by just trying things out on yourself. As we just talked about with iron, for example, with B12, that's an obvious one. Like, vegans need to be making sure you're supplementing B12. With iron, you can listen to your body, see, like, you know, you can get blood tests. You can see what your energy levels are like, things like this. But there are some genes that it's quite hard to know about. So, for example, I inherited a gene from my dad, who had dementia, but it does increase your risk of dementia dramatically. It's actually called the Alzheimer's gene. And this is something you can't know about until you're like maybe 60, when you could start developing Alzheimer's disease, or later, unless you have it running in your family and it's clear. So yeah, looking at your family history is another thing. But for me, having that information about myself, knowing that I have this gene and that I can make changes now that's going to help my health in the future, that is incredibly important for me.
So how does it work then with the DNA test? Do you send off like a blood sample or something, or?
It's a saliva swab. Yeah, I get this question a lot, actually. Does it involve blood? And, you know, this is my favorite thing about DNA testing. It's like, you find out so much about your body, and all you need is a saliva swab. It's easier than doing a COVID test.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but for me, like, organizing blood tests, like going to my doctors to get a blood test, is like, you know, you put it off for ages, don't you?
Okay. So in terms of Vojo, the company that you run, so people can head to your website and sign up. And I think it's £100, is that right? £99?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you send out a kit, you send off your saliva, And then what kind of results do you kind of like explain the results clearly? Because I'm presuming they're quite scientific when they come back.
Yeah, so you get a nice report which takes you through everything, explains everything, points out your most important genes with the most evidence. And you can find out more information on our website and get all the references to the science if you're more of a science nerd. But for those who aren't, yes, it's all explained relatively simply.
Okay, I'm really tempted to get mine done.
I wanted to add another one to your question, because you did mention protein before. So how do you figure out that you're getting enough protein? I mean, you can calculate it. There are ways to figure out, okay, for your activity level, like how much sport you're doing, how much protein you need. But there are some people, and this is a common issue on a vegan diet, I bet loads of people have heard someone say this, that they don't feel satisfied. They don't feel full. They're constantly hungry. And it is true that some people need more protein than others. And it's partly down to a gene called FTO, which is dubbed the fat gene, which isn't the best name in the world, but it's dubbed this because it's associated with weight gain and obesity. Right. And if you have this gene, you tend to feel hungrier than others. Actually, it's very good. It used to be very good for survival, because you're driven to eat more and like have fat stores so that you can survive longer. So, it's important to remember that all of your genes exist for a reason, to help you survive. And at some point they did that. Now they might actually not be beneficial anymore. And this is one of those examples. So if you are finding that you're constantly hungry, make sure that you're eating more protein. Make sure you're eating protein in every meal and snack. You can probably tell if you have this gene. Usually people with this gene realize that they have to do more exercise to keep their weight down, and that they tend to eat more than others. So that's one way to figure out, without a DNA test, like how much protein you might need.
Okay. And what would you suggest? We did cover this a few episodes ago, actually. Someone, a listener sent a question in, and one of the plant-based health professionals answered it. So what kind of protein sources would you recommend for people to have in every meal and snack?
There's such a variety. You really want to be getting a variety, because then you're getting all the different amino acids. So one of my favorites is tempeh, because that's one of the best sources of protein on a vegan diet. I think it has like almost twice as much protein as tofu, which is pretty amazing.
Wow.
And then obviously tofu. Obviously like a range of beans and pulses. Lentils are very high as well. But also some seeds as well. It's surprising how high some seeds are in protein.
It's amazing, isn't it? What these little things, you can sprinkle some seeds on your avocado on toast, or, onto your salad or whatever. And it just kind of ups your protein intake. It's amazing. I've spoken to lots of nutritionists actually over the past year on the podcast. And what seems to come up time and time again is variety. And like you just mentioned, covering lots of different bases, rather than going, right, tempeh is high in protein, I'm going to have tempeh every single day. So, we really should be sort of eating as many different foods as possible, shouldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. Variety is definitely key. Like, as I said, with protein, especially getting that range of amino acids. And with colourful foods, of course, I mean, everyone's heard eating the rainbow, and there's a good reason for it. Different colours have different phytonutrients, which are good for all sorts of things in our body. But yeah, you're right. It is really key to have variety.
What kind of foods do you eat on a daily basis then? What kind of breakfast, lunch and dinners do you have?
Chia seeds for sure, every day, without fail. This might be slightly controversial, but I do like chocolate every day.
It's got to be done.
My favorite, I have a stockpile of chocolate in my in one of my drawers underneath my clothes, but don't tell anyone. But actually the health benefits of chocolate are vast. Seriously, it has to be dark, so at least 70% dark chocolate. But yeah, there are so many benefits, and it's actually quite a rich source of nutrients. So I recommend it.
Brilliant. That's what we like to hear in January.
Definitely some leafy greens, some form of whole grain. a few portions of protein every day, and they're always different. So maybe some tofu for one meal, some lentils for another meal, some beans for another meal.
So for anyone new to veganism this month, obviously we're in Veganuary, and I mean, it is overwhelming, isn't it? Sometimes all the information, like the episode I recorded, my co-host wasn't able to join me. So it was just me. And I just felt like I was literally like doing a brain dump on all our listeners because you kind of have all this information in your head, and you're trying to sort of explain it in a really simple way. But there is an awful lot of information, isn't there? Where would you advise people to start if they're completely new to all this?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. There is an incredible amount of information out there. And as we already discussed, a lot of it can be contradictory as well. But do you mean where can people start in terms of information or with their diet?
I guess, yeah, I mean, both really. I mean, obviously there's loads of resources online, isn't there? You've got obviously Veganuary itself, or the Vegan Society, or Vegan Food and Living. But yeah, in terms of their diet, how would you recommend they do it? Because I spoke about there being kind of two different ways of doing it. You can either kind of swap, your mince meat for processed soya mince to start off with, just to kind of ease you into it. Or you can go sort of full on whole food, plant-based, and not use any of these processed products. What would you recommend?
If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said whole food, plant-based, just do it. Nowadays, I'm a bit more relaxed about it. So yeah, just do what is easy for you at first. And some of the alternative to meats are actually quite good now. So yeah, I would, as you said, swap out real mince for vegan mince or something. And some of the vegan corn products actually I quite like. And mycoprotein is very high in protein. I mean, it's basically pure protein. So it's really cool that Corn are doing vegan products now, because a lot of them are vegetarians, so they were. Yeah. But I find those really, really cool and really easy to swap out. But yeah, just do a few things at a time. Like you don't have to go into it straight away, although some people prefer to do that, but just do what works for you.
Yeah, I guess it depends how much time you have, doesn't it? Because if you are literally working in an office full time, for example, or doing night shifts and things like that, and perhaps you have children, you don't have a lot of time to be kind of researching recipes and whole food, plant-based food swaps and things like that, then it's a good way into it to use some of these, we say processed, but not all products are, equal in terms of their processed nature, are they? Like you say, some of the corn products are high in protein and do have lots of benefits. Obviously, if you're talking about things that are fried and I don't know, I'm trying to think of, sort of highly processed. I can't think of an example, but obviously you want to be having those not so often.
Yeah, for sure. There are so many levels to processing. I mean, tofu is a processed food technically, I mean, it's a raw product, so it's processed. Just do it at a level that you feel comfortable with. You're right. There are some processed products which aren't great. There are lots of kind of vegan cakes and stuff, which, as a treat, great. Other than that, probably want to avoid. And if you are sensitive to omega-6s like me, it can be actually quite difficult to find some cakes which are, or like ready-made cakes, which are like good for you. But yeah, you're right. Like just being aware that the level of the processing of the foods.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and stepping in at the last minute. It's been really interesting. So if anyone wants to find out more, they can head over to the Vojo website. And presumably you're on sort of Instagram, Facebook, things like that as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So our website is vojo.health. And on every social media platform, we're Vojo Health.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, go and check it out and see whether, you might be interested in taking a DNA test and finding out more and delving into your nutrition a little bit more.
It was great fun to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Holly.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to leave us a review on your platform of choice and also subscribe to the podcast. And why not share it with a friend? Perhaps they might be inspired to try Veganuary or take up veganism as well. I'm back on Tuesday with Molly. Hooray! We'll be talking about all things Veganuary again, lots of tips and recipes to keep you inspired throughout the month of January. In the meantime, head to the Vegan Food and Living website where you'll find all kinds of articles, recipes and advice.